Seeking God's protection is not merely a request made at a certain time of the day, but it is the posture of the soul that longs to dwell under the shadow of the Almighty. When a believer comes before the Lord in humility, acknowledging that without Him there is no safety and no peace, then the heart begins to rest in the assurance that God is both shield and fortress. To seek His protection is to confess openly that human strength is fragile, that human wisdom is limited, and that without the covering of the Most High, the dangers of this world can easily overtake us. Yet when one chooses to hide in the Lord, there is a supernatural defense, a wall of fire that surrounds, a refuge that cannot be penetrated by the schemes of the enemy. Each day, visible and invisible battles surround us. There are arrows of fear, anxieties that torment the mind, and evil plots that arise in silence. Yet the Word declares that the Lord shall deliver His children from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. To seek His protection is to hold fast to these promises with unwavering faith. It is to rise in prayer and say, Lord, guard my steps as I walk, cover my mind as I think, preserve my soul as I rest. In doing so, the believer is not merely reciting words, but placing trust in the one whose eyes see all things, whose hand is mighty to save, and whose love is unfailing even in the darkest hour. Protection from God is not confined to physical safety, though He surely preserves His people from harm. It is deeper. It is the shielding of the spirit from despair, the guarding of the heart from bitterness, and the preservation of faith when storms rage. To seek His protection is to ask that one's spirit remains unshaken, that temptations lose their grip, and that the peace of Christ remains unbroken even when chaos swirls around. It is to rest beneath the everlasting arms, knowing that the Lord fights unseen battles and brings victory where defeat seemed certain. The psalmist declared that the Lord is a sun and shield, bestowing favor and honor upon those who walk uprightly. When we seek His protection, we are not running from life, but standing in the strength of one who commands the hosts of heaven. It is the cry of a child who knows the Father's embrace is the safest place. The prayer of a soul that has tasted the goodness of divine shelter. It is not weakness to seek God's protection, but wisdom, for even kings and warriors are helpless without His covering. Therefore, let the heart continually draw near, asking, Lord, surround me with your presence. Deliver me from hidden dangers, and establish me firmly upon your promises. For in that seeking there is true security and unshakable peace. Peaceful rest is a gift that the human heart longs for, yet so often struggles to find. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and anxieties that weigh heavily upon the soul, rest can feel distant, like a fleeting shadow slipping away just when one reaches for it. Yet the Lord, who created the heavens and the earth, has promised His children a rest that is not bound to circumstances, but rooted in His eternal presence. When the soul turns to Him at the end of the day, weary from burdens carried and battles faced, there is a gentle whisper from above that says, "Come to me, and I will give you rest." In that moment, rest becomes more than physical sleep. It becomes a divine exchange where fear is lifted and peace is poured out like oil upon the troubled heart. Peaceful rest begins when trust is placed in the one who never slumbers nor sleeps. The body may grow weak and the eyes may close, but the Lord's watchful gaze remains constant through the night. He is the shepherd who guards his flock, ensuring no wolf or thief draws near. When one lies down under his covering, the mind no longer needs to rehearse tomorrow's worries or yesterday's regrets, for he holds time in his hands and declares the end from the beginning. Rest flows when the believer chooses to release control, acknowledging that no amount of striving or planning can secure the future like the presence of God can. This rest is not shallow or temporary. It is a deep stillness that touches the soul. It silences the torment of anxious thoughts. It soothes the restless spirit. And it brings comfort to the heart that has been battered by trials. In the night seasons, when fears try to rise and shadows seem overwhelming, peaceful rest reminds the believer that light is never absent, for the Lord himself is the lamp that cannot be extinguished. His promises are like a blanket that covers. His word is like a fortress that surrounds, and his spirit is the gentle breath that calms the storms within. True rest does not come from the absence of troubles, but from the presence of God in the midst of them. It is a rest that confesses, though battles may rage and storms may rise, I will not be shaken, for my soul is anchored in the Lord. Peaceful rest is therefore not only the closing of weary eyes, but the quiet assurance that one is safe, loved, and held by the everlasting arms. It is lying down without fear, knowing that even in sleep, the Lord is working, watching, and sustaining. In this rest, the believer awakens renewed. For the peace of God has done what no human effort could accomplish, bringing strength to the body, clarity to the mind, and stillness to the heart. Trust in God's promises is the foundation upon which faith is built, for without trust, the promises of the Lord remain distant words. But with trust, they become living truth that sustains the soul in every circumstance. From the very beginning, God has revealed himself as faithful, speaking words that never return void and declaring covenants that he himself fulfills. The scriptures are filled with assurances of his protection, his guidance, his provision, and his unfailing love. Yet, it is only when the heart clings to these promises with unwavering faith that they become a source of strength and peace. To trust in God's promises is to choose belief over doubt, surrender over fear, and hope over despair. It is to say, even when circumstances appear impossible, that God's word is greater than what my eyes can see, and his plan is stronger than what my mind can understand. Every trial faced in life is an opportunity to test this trust. For promises are not always fulfilled instantly, nor are they always fulfilled in ways that the human heart expects. Abraham trusted God's promise of a son, though his body was good as dead, and his faith was counted to him as righteousness. Israel trusted God's promise of deliverance, though they stood before the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army behind them, and the waters parted to make a way. Trust in God's promises requires patience, endurance, and often a willingness to walk by faith when sight gives no assurance. Yet it is in those very moments that God proves himself true. The promises of God are not fragile, nor do they fade with time. He has spoken, and he will act. He has declared, and he will bring it to pass. When fear whispers that the night is too dark, his promise declares that joy will come in the morning. When weakness overwhelms, his promise assures that his strength is made perfect in weakness. When loneliness creeps, in his word reminds that he will never leave nor forsake his children. Each promise is like a stone placed beneath the feet of the believer, creating a solid path through the uncertain waters of life. Trusting in these promises does not mean that storms will not come, but it means that in the storm, the believer stands secure, knowing the anchor of God's word holds firm. It is the assurance that God cannot lie, that his covenant is everlasting, and that his goodness pursues those who belong to him. To rest in his promises is to find peace when the world trembles, to find courage when fear arises, and to find hope when all else seems lost. It is a trust that transforms the heart. For once a soul has tasted the faithfulness of God's promises, nothing in this world can shake its confidence in the one who speaks and brings all things to pass. Faith and surrender walk hand in hand. For true faith is not merely believing in the promises of God, but releasing control into his hands and on allowing his will to prevail above our own. Many strive to hold tightly to their plans, their desires, and their understanding, yet the call of faith is a call to let go, to yield fully, and to rest in the assurance that God's wisdom is higher than human wisdom, and his ways are greater than human ways. Surrender is not weakness. It is the strength of humility that acknowledges God as sovereign Lord over all. It is the recognition that no matter how strong one may feel, or how secure one may appear, without him, life remains fragile, fleeting, and uncertain. Faith is trusting his promises. Surrender is laying everything at his feet. And together, they form the foundation of a life anchored in divine purpose. When trials come, faith alone might declare that God is able. But surrender bows the heart and says, "Not my will, but yours be done." It is easy to proclaim faith when circumstances align with desires, yet true faith is tested in the fire of surrender. When outcomes are uncertain and the heart still chooses to believe. Abraham's faith led him to trust that God could give him a son, but surrender led him to lay Isaac on the altar, holding nothing back. Christ himself demonstrated perfect faith and surrender in Gethsemane, trusting the Father's plan even as he surrendered his will, saying, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me, nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Faith believes, surrender obeys, and the union of both leads to transformation that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. To live by faith and surrender is to walk each day with open hands, ready to receive what God gives and willing to release what he takes away. It is to rise in the morning with prayers of trust and to lie down at night with the assurance that the Lord holds every detail of life within his care. It is the freedom of no longer carrying the crushing weight of self-reliance, for the heart has learned to rest in the one who carries all burdens. Faith says God is able to open doors. Surrender says if the door remains closed, He is still good. Faith says mountains can be moved. Surrender says if the mountain God's watchful protection is the assurance that the Lord who created heaven and earth is never absent from the life of His children. For He is the ever-present keeper who neither slumbers nor sleeps. When the heart grows weary and the body seeks rest, there is a divine comfort in knowing that the eyes of the Lord remain open, beholding every step, guarding every soul, and sustaining every breath. The psalmist declares that He will not allow your foot to be moved, meaning that the Lord Himself establishes the path of those who trust in Him and does not permit the enemy to overthrow their steps. To dwell under His watchful care is to walk with confidence that every moment of the day and every hour of the night is secured by the presence of the Almighty who surrounds His people like a shield. God's protection is not passive but active, and a vigilant defense that works in ways unseen by human eyes. Just as a shepherd watches over his flock, warding off wolves and keeping his sheep from straying, so does the Lord keep His children from stumbling into snares and deliver them from the schemes of the wicked. His watchfulness extends beyond human awareness. For while man sees only what is near, God discerns the hidden dangers that lie ahead and steers His people away from harm. The soul that abides under His watch recognizes that every preserved step, every avoided disaster, every unseen deliverance is evidence of His merciful hand at work. There is profound comfort in the truth that the Lord neither slumbers nor sleeps. For while the world grows silent and human strength gives way to rest, God remains alert, faithful in His guardianship. In the stillness of the night, when fear seeks to rise, when the shadows press heavy upon the mind, the believer rests in the knowledge that heaven's keeper never turns away, never grows weary, and never forsakes those who belong to Him. He is the constant watchman who guards the soul not only from physical harm, but also from despair, from discouragement, and from the spiritual attacks that seek to unsettle the heart. His watchful protection is a covering that ensures the believer can lie down in peace and rise in strength. For the Lord has preserved both body and spirit through the unseen battles of the night. To know God's watchful protection is to live free from crippling fear. For if the Lord Himself is keeper, no enemy can prevail and no darkness can overcome. It is the assurance that the sun shall not strike by day, nor the moon by night, because His covering presence stands as a fortress around the soul. The heart that meditates on this truth learns to trust that every detail of life rests securely in His hands, and that His gaze never turns away, His care never falters, and His power never diminishes. Even for a moment, peaceful rest in God's presence is the deep assurance that the soul finds when it learns to lean upon the everlasting arms of the Lord, for He alone is the source of true stillness and calm. The world may offer temporary comfort, fleeting moments of relief, or shallow promises of peace. Yet none of these can quiet the heart as the presence of God does. When a weary soul draws near to Him, burdens begin to lift, the noise of restless thoughts begins to fade, and at a holy silence covers the spirit like a gentle blanket. It is here in this sacred nearness that one finds the kind of rest that does not depend on circumstances. For the peace of God is not the absence of storms, but the assurance that the Lord himself is present in the midst of them as night falls and the mind reflects on the struggles of the day. Anxieties often rise and attempt to rob the heart of rest. Yet the one who places trust in God's presence can lay down without fear, for the Lord is a shield about his people. He does not grow weary, and he does not abandon those who belong to him. His watchful eyes remain fixed upon his children, guarding their souls and keeping their steps, even as they sleep. Peaceful rest is not the result of perfect conditions, but of perfect confidence in the one who holds time and eternity in his hands. It is the acknowledgement that no amount of planning or striving can secure the future, but God who rules over all ensures that his purposes are fulfilled and his people are sustained. To rest in God's presence is to enter into the safety of his promises, knowing that he has declared, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." This assurance silences fear, it quiets the troubled spirit, and it strengthens faith even in the darkest hour. When shadows loom large and the mind seeks to rehearse tomorrow's worries, the Spirit of the Lord brings a gentle reminder that he is near, that he is in control, and that he has already gone before to make a way. This nearness becomes a fortress for the soul, a shelter that guards against the arrows of fear and the whispers of doubt. In his presence, one does not merely sleep but abides in peace, a peace that surpasses human understanding and guards both heart and mind. Peaceful rest in God's presence is a gift that renews both body and spirit. For when the believer surrenders into his care, the weight of self-reliance is lifted and the joy of divine trust takes its place. It is the deep stillness that anchors the soul in the certainty of God's love, reminding that even in sleep he is at work, he is watching, and he is keeping. The night becomes not a time of fear, but a holy moment of renewal where the believer awakens with new strength, refreshed by the peace that only the presence of God can bring.